Kia ora koutou. My name is Morna Haist. I'm a first generation Pākehā New Zealander, and I currently live on the west coast of British Columbia here in Lions Bay on the side of a mountain. This is, I was going to say the third, but the second country that I've lived in the last 3 years. And we're about to move house this weekend. We sold our home in New Zealand 3 years ago, sold everything we owned, all of our furniture, moved our children to the States for a year, which is a really long story. And then we came to Canada. So we're about to move into a new house with no furniture in it. For the first time in 3 years, we've been living in furnished places. So it's kind of a weird day for me. At the end of today, I'll leave this house and move into a place with kind of nothing inside it. We haven't really bought anything yet. Great way of phrasing it, running away from home, because it kind of felt like that. I guess a couple of things. I've been a traveller my whole life. So the very first time I left home, I was 17, and I went from New Zealand to London, England. It was kind of my first, left the house, went to London, and I've been travelling my whole life. And then I'm married to a Canadian. We had our first child the first time we went to Canada. We had our first baby in Toronto in the early 2000s. Then when she was 1, we returned to New Zealand, and we set up life there for a good 15 years, I guess. I had another child there. And then my husband and I sort of feeling of wanting something different. New Zealand is it's an amazing country. And both of us were really reaching the limits of our work in the world there. I was doing a lot of work in North America, and flying to Canada or flying to America was starting to feel like a domestic flight because I was doing it so often. And then I was on the governing council of a global leadership organization called ALIA, and we sold that organization to a university in Colorado. And so I was going there to help set up a new centre, to help make the transition. I loved it. My husband said, he worked for an American company, said, what if I could get a transfer there? Should we try and go and live there for a while? And after a very long process of getting American visas, which took a year, and the FBI got involved and all kinds of weirdness, we ended up in the States. And we had, and we still do have, 2 teenage daughters at the time. We said, okay, it's going to be for a year. Let's go on this adventure. We ended up selling our home and just taking our 6 suitcases, 8 suitcases with us, and a few personal kind of mementos. And so, it's interesting because as I hear myself talk about this, I can't actually name what caused us to do this. It was one of those times when I think one of us had this idea, and then it's snowballing, and then we're there, and it was huge. And so also over that time, I've been in business for myself for, I guess, coming up 18 years. And I had a really thriving practice in New Zealand, had this great training and coaching business, which I left, and then sort of went on the journey of discovering the online world, which that's the journey I've been on for the last couple of years, last 3 years. In my work in the world, I work with leaders who are working on solving some of the toughest problems we face as a species, and women. I work with female leaders, and I love how the universe is always giving me lessons in my own life that mirror how I need to show up for the people I work with, and also mirror the experience of what the people I work with are experiencing. And how do we navigate challenging times and complex issues? And what does it take to show up in challenging times? And, I've really been paying attention, as I was saying earlier, I think, to my own narrative and the stories that I tell myself about what's happening. It's been such an interesting time. It's really interesting having this conversation because I don't think I've really paused to really reflect in on the core lessons of this time for me. And I am a different person. I've fundamentally been changed through this experience. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm super grateful for it, even though it's been pretty shit with a capital S a lot of the time. It has to be. And I feel like in those moments of, I love that phrase, glorious shit. It's great. I feel like in those moments we have really significant choices to make about which direction we're going to go in, navigating the shit. And, I feel in my work, I talk a lot about warriorship, this idea of being a warrior in the world, not from a place of what we might think from a masculine point of view, but from a place of how do we take a stand? How do we continue to stand in what's important to us? How do we show up in a way we want to show up when times are really challenging? And how do we stay on that path? And it's not about being, certainly not about being perfect, because I let that one go. I threw that idea away a long time ago. But, I've never raised a chronically ill teenager. I don't know what I'm doing, and so I've really found this year in particular of raising my level of consciousness around, okay, who do I need to be in this next moment? There's so much. Yeah, it's been super curious, because I think, as I was just hinting at earlier, my work has mirrored my personal life in so many ways. I've been experimenting with some different online programs and a membership program around this idea of how do we want to show up? How do we show up? And just making these questions conscious, making these questions conscious. And I've also such an interesting experiment, and I'm curious as to whether you've just sort of found this. When you're working with physical humans in a room, you're getting that real-time feedback, how things are landing. And I found often when I'm putting things out in a digital space, I don't really know, is this hitting, and then just recently I've had just really random things happening, and a woman sent me a note saying, hey, I want you to know that thing you did a year ago is still online, that talk you gave online is still, so I think I want to acknowledge your bravery in doing a project like this. And I think if I could maybe give a message to anyone who might be hearing this, who's working on a project or is trying to put stuff out into the world, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep doing it. Even if you're not getting that direct in the moment feedback. And if it's impacting anyone, it's you. So many of the women I work with expect to have it all figured out. Well, certainly in an initial conversation, because we tend to present that front of, yeah, I've got this all figured out. I'm going to do this and that. But yeah, so many of us have never done, we're women who are path creators. We're charting uncharted waters. And, oh man, if I could just say one thing to women, stop trying to figure it all out. Stop trying to have it all perfect before you present the baby to the world. Because firstly, you can't. And secondly, just do it, just get started. And I think that's one of the reasons why I actually really don't have very big feelings other than excitement about moving into this new house. And that, yeah, we'll figure it out and we'll make it work. And, if there's, in the story of you talking about your YouTube channel and your son saying, oh, it needs this and it needs that. If you'd been sitting at your desk before starting this program going, okay, well, I'm going to have the perfect YouTube channel. It's going to need this and that. I'm going to research all these things, and forget it. Forget it. So it doesn't matter, because I know for sure that there's going to be something that gets said in that conversation, as you know for sure, that's going to make a difference, even if it's just for me. And so I found that through taking action, my work, as I've been kind of trying to consolidate my body of work into more formal models, into things that can help other people make sense of them, I need to be experimenting in the world as I do that. So, you know, what am I trying to say? I guess, I don't know, there's that great research, or kind of disappointing research, that shows that, you know, if men and women going for a promotion in their jobs, a man will apply, even if there's a whiff that it might work out, and he doesn't have any of the qualifications, whereas a woman will look at it and go, I need to go and get an MBA before I can apply for this job. And I think the world's missing out on our rawness, on our, the world's missing out when we do that. You know, for me, it's always been around being in a sisterhood of women, I want to use the phrase unisolating myself. I don't even know if that's a word, but being in a sisterhood of women who are on the journey, and just having people around us who are going to be there for us. So, for example, when I started my first Facebook group, I messaged 10 of my close friends and I said, look, this probably isn't your thing, but I need you to show up for me. Just come and be there so that I know that you're with me while I do this really, really scary thing. And then also, I think for someone like me, doing this can be really helpful because people see me in a certain way because they've seen me work, they've seen me on stage, they've seen me at the front of the room. They think I'm someone. And I've been really working on how much of my story do I share? You know, what becomes like what's useful and when do I share it? Because I think we're often comparing our insides to other people's outsides. You know, how they present in the world, because we're only seeing this external presentation. We're not seeing the conversation that might be happening in their head, or whatever they feel inside, or it's like the top of the iceberg. They might see me on stage, but they're not seeing all of the frickin' mess and shit that I had to wade through to get there, to show up for that 15 minutes of glory. They're like, oh my God, she makes it look so easy. Well, actually, I've been practicing my craft for 20 years, firstly, but secondly, it ain't easy. So I think we've got to make that mess way more visible. And I certainly know some of the women that I work with, and me included, what can hold me back from that is this misunderstanding that people are going to view me as less competent, or people are going to view me as not having all my shit together, or people are going to make X, Y, Z. And actually, I've let go of that because I don't want to work with those folks anyway. If that's the lens that they're seeing me through, they're not my people. So I just think, how can we help other women stop making it look like, we've totally got our shit together, and really acknowledge, talk about what it feels inside, talk about what we do to help ourselves, and then seek help and support from other women who can actively help us, and who want to see us. And I think this is kind of the old boys club have got it right. I mean, I don't want to create an old gals club, because I don't think we need to do it in the same way. But it's also been curious coming into the online space and kind of finding this world that I didn't know existed, and really, I think also getting past the idea that other women are our competition, because they're not. Like, nobody is your competition. Nobody can replicate me. There's a big enough pie out there for all of us to thrive. And I think, we've been, certainly in my opinion, in our modern society, been sold the idea that there isn't a big enough pie. So we need to claw our way and then, make sure we get rid of everyone else, that we can keep a hold of our piece of the pie, but there's plenty of room for everyone. And I want to say that, because I'm thinking through all of the women that I work with and the women in my circle, I feel like we all experience what you just described. I feel like all of us at some level believe that something is happening to us that's fundamentally different, bad, wrong than other people. And we get trapped in our own little prisons of, I mean, I know for me, because I've been teaching in the adult development space for so long, I can get trapped in oh, fuck, you know how to do all of this. Like, you know all of the tools here. What's wrong with you? Why are you feeling this way? If people knew that you weren't dealing well with the situation, they think you were a fraud, blah, 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 blah. All of those different internal conversations, I feel like there's such freedom, as you say, in sharing our stories, but just shining a light on these things that we believe are only happening to us. It doesn't necessarily make them any less challenging to deal with, but perhaps we can stop feeling so frickin' isolated. And then the other thing that came up for me as you were talking, in early June, I went to Women Deliver here in Vancouver. It's a big global gathering of women changemakers, and they had a plenary session on the leaders of kind of the big major women's movements in the world, and Tarana Burke was one of them, the woman who started Me Too. And there was the women on stage had a really interesting conversation around the telling of stories, and around, because, she was talking about what happened during the Me Too movement, that women's stories were becoming this kind of commodity and this bargaining chip, and that, if anything, and that, we were being asked to share these vulnerable stories to try and shift something in the world, and that for many women, actually, no, that's not healthy, not what they needed to be doing, and certainly not on social media, out into the ethers. And so, she really said, and it was so powerful, we must tell our stories, but there's nothing obliging us to put a megaphone on that story and broadcast it to the entire world, but find someone, and that the sharing of your story is, it has to happen for any healing to happen. Yeah, how do we own our power around our stories, and how do we shift our relationship to our stories? That was actually a super interesting, Women Deliver was super interesting to me, because it was, really was amazing to be kind of back in that change-making world and talking with women who really are at the front lines of gender equity around the planet. But nobody at that gathering was talking about what's about to happen on our planet. No one. And I kind of left it with a feeling of, like, what? Nobody's ringing the alarm bells about the massive changes that are going to be happening on our planet in the next 10 to 20 years. As the more and more I've been studying this and applying it and looking at the changes in my own work, I'm absolutely convinced that women are the change leaders that we need, that women are the ones who are poised to make this kind of evolutionary and developmental leap for all the reasons that we've been held back, our emotional landscape, our access to our inner wisdom, when we can peel back the kind of all of the social crap that's been piled on us and what we can really do in the world. And I'm not really sure why I went down that route, but what I felt at this gathering, there were 8,000 women at Women Deliver. It was kind of crazy. And I just really had this palpable feeling that if we stopped isolating ourselves, if we came together, then we could really make a difference. Look, we got to talk about this, because that is such a hot topic for me too. Like, people look at what I do in my life and they're like, I'm always getting that, I don't know how you do that. Or, ugh. And I'm like, it's interesting actually, because for me, I feel like it's a little bit of a trigger, because I'm like, okay, what's the judgment here? Like, what is the judgment? Because I've always had lots of different things going on, and then the da da da. And I'm like, yeah, you actually just do it. I mean, you just do it. And you're right. What are you going to do? Leave your kids at the curb? What am I going to do? Ignore the fact that I've got a chronically ill kid? Am I also going to ignore the fact that I have a gift to give to the world, that the world really does need me? And, the curious thing is that all of the work I need to do to be able to show up for my daughter skillfully, it's all the same work that I do in the world. So it's not like this compartmentalized stuff. It's all part of the same thing. And oh man, we could talk for hours about that. And it's also made me think about some of the careless kind of flippant comments we make to each other, and how just a simple shift, even just saying something, oh, I'm so curious about that experience for you, all right, just open the doorway to what it could be. And then, I know for me, if folks were able to, if more people were able to approach my life in that way, then maybe I could open more space to tell folks more about what things are really like. Because the alternative too is this presentation of Superwoman, which we all know is just total horseshit. And, the worst thing for women since sliced bread. It's fascinating. One of my business partners and I, we've been having a lot of this conversation lately, because, we're really interested and curious about how we create our lives as women. And, we've been kind of looking at, I guess, how we got here as women. And, the women's movement has opened up so many spaces for us to engage in life in so many different ways. But we haven't, the way I see it anyway, is we haven't as women fundamentally gone about the business of actually creating what could life look like for women, because we're just always tacking on more and more and more. Oh, we could be this and this, and we can be all of these things. And a system that was designed by men for men, not for women, and how we actually live our lives, which is another reason why we need to take over. And I think we should do this next.